How have we reached this point in society? How have we reached to the point where citizens can be tricked into taking what was called a vaccine, but was actually a gene therapy, under the promise that this is a tried and true type of vaccine? Of course, the mRNA or the RNA delivery method has existed forever, but the ingredients in it, the way that it was applied to humanity en masse, to everyone, it was something that was never before seen in the history of mankind. It was experimentation on billions of people. And we still don't know what the side effects will be 10, 20, 30 years from now. And again, it wasn't a vaccine, it was a gene therapy, gene manipulation, doing something. I'm not a scientist, but doing something to our genes. How will it change us? How will it affect the children of people that were subjected to this experiment? How have we reached the point where every single mainstream institution has bought in on the idea that a man could become a woman and that a woman can become a man? That by injecting chemicals into one's body and modifying it, that actually makes you that thing you're trying to turn yourself into. It's madness. A lot of people don't want to look at it. A lot of people in mainstream culture don't want to look at it. Because if you really look at it, like really look at it, it's quite terrifying. A cult belief that we have a magical gender identity, this internal perception of who we are, and for each person that is different, so each person can modify their body or choose not to in any way they want, and that somehow we can align our physical appearance with this gender soul, for lack of a better word. Although some of the trans rights activists, the ones that are more honest, do admit that it's the gender soul. A lot of them rely on sophistry and using various conditions, people born with no uterus, people born with an intersex condition. A lot of them use that as sophistry to trick people into thinking there is some actual scientific basis for this. But of course, there's not. If you look at the peer review studies that have been done, it's just the words of confused people that believe that they can actually become the opposite sex or gender, as they say. What do you do when you have these peer review studies that tricks unsuspecting normie progressive types into supporting something so overtly evil? What do you do if the people that are doing the peer reviews are nuts? What do you do if your peers have lost their minds, that their minds have been infected with a mimetic virus that convinces them that reality is malleable? What do you do when liberalism is bastardized? The idea that we are all born equally and we are seen as equals under the law. What do you do when people decide to try to force equitable outcomes and discriminate, usually supposedly on behalf of Black people, and discriminate against other groups that are on average more successful? To me, as a former classical liberal, that's a bastardization of liberalism, right? That's why James Lindsay refers to it as just communism. It's, okay, well, if we're born equal and we're all equal, then whites would be equal to blacks. Blacks would be equal to Jews. Jews would be equal to Asians. What do you do when society has gone mad? Now, everyone blames, you have a certain ideology, or there's a certain ideology that you don't like, you're not going to blame your ideology. You're going to blame this other ideology that you view as faulty, right? Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, he's done a lot of stuff that I like. He posted a couple days ago, just so we're clear, it isn't communist or fascist destroying society. It's the liberals. Austin Paget, don't know who that is. Ludwig Mises. Let's look at this guy. I'm assuming he is, he's a publisher at the Mises Institute. So, libertarian-minded individual. He said, the people you refer to as liberals are communists, and all communists are fascists. So he's trying to take the blame off of liberalism because he wants to save or reform liberalism in a similar way that James Lindsay claims to want to do. And then Carl Benjamin said, the people you think are communists are all liberals. And that's when I chimed in and I said, Carl, you and I both know that they're Fabian socialists. Carl is in the UK. The Labour Party, which is in control now, has, a lot of people don't know this, but they were created by Fabian socialists. They don't so much favor a violent revolution, but so much they prefer a slower, more methodical, incremental approach to socially engineer society, wear away at what you would refer to as classically liberal tenets and ideas to slowly usher in a sort of technocratic form of communism. You know, they, all these different socialists, the democratic socialists, you got the tankies, you have like the queer Marxists, all these different groups. The end goal is the same, just how they're going to go about it is slightly different. Like the Democrats in America, in my mind, they're largely Fabian socialists. Now you have the on the ground Marxists, the ones who burned cities down during the George Floyd protests and riots. And of course, Joe Biden, what does he say about Antifa? The people that burned that down. Antifa is just an idea. We all know that's a lie. Antifa, the people that actually adhere to Antifa and belong in Antifa, are anarcho-communists. And Joe Biden is, of course, providing cover for those people. Does Joe Biden actually know that the psychopaths in Antifa are anarcho-communists? They want to burn everything down. They want to destroy all order and then usher in this stupid anarcho-communist utopia. I don't know. Joe Biden's, brains have been oozing out of his ears for several years. Now, do the people underneath Joe Biden understand this? Of course. There's extreme Marxist radicals littered throughout the entire Democratic Party. And so they're clearly giving cover to these members of Antifa by just saying, oh, Antifa is an idea. It just means anti-fascist. Don't you want to be an anti-fascist? They're giving cover to them to the point now you have 45-year-old wine moms out there confronting ICE, screaming, we're Antifa. Do those wine moms adhere to anarcho-communism? No, of course not. Maybe some of them do, but most of them don't. The majority of these normie, progressive, liberal Democrat types have no idea that Antifa is a sort of loosely connected, various groups all over the country kind of organization that strictly adhere to anarcho-communism. It's a support bred on ignorance. I know a normie progressive who, very successful man, has a successful family, lovely man, lovely family, has a lovely wife, and owns a business. And he told me the same thing. Oh, Antifa is an idea. It means anti-fascist. And I explained to him, I was like, well, no. They think that we live in a fascist state and that capitalism upholds communism. And so they want to dissolve all private property. And they view private property as having a business. And so they literally want to destroy your way of life, rip your business from you, remove the ability for people to have those businesses. And of course, they also want to dissolve the nuclear family. Because they believe the nuclear family, through social reproduction theory, basically just creates more little worker drones that go out to uphold the system of capitalism, which upholds fascism. None of these people know this. Now, I said this to Carl. I posted this under there. Carl didn't respond to me. I got 8 likes, though. Woo! I said, Carl, you and I both know they're Fabian socialists. So the people that are calling themselves the Labour Party, the liberals, right? The liberal Labour Party in the UK, are they liberals? They call themselves liberals, but there is definitive proof that the Fabian socialists created the Labour Party to slowly wear away at the sovereignty of the UK. They have an entire plan to bring in Muslims, people that will not mesh with the current occupants, the natives in the UK. They have an entire plan in order to bring them in and cause enough destabilization. And then the Fabian socialists, the people that created the problem, of course, as they often do, offer the solution, which is a sort of technocratic surveillance state. Oh, there's too much immigration and they're not getting along. Okay, well, we're going to put cameras everywhere and require digital forms of ID to cut down on the illegal immigration and make sure that there is less trouble, right? That's what they always do. They love to create the problem and then offer the solution. That's what manipulative psychopaths do. So Carl is saying that they all call themselves liberals. And it's like, yeah, but I know people in real life that are liberals, but they don't uphold classically liberal tenets. Now, what are classically liberal tenets? The idea that James Lindsay always says, and I do agree with him, that man can't be God, the idea of the separation of powers, no form of faith or any kind of faith would be removed from the public square. They believe that there is a reality that exists externally from our own perceptions. And so, according to James Lindsay and his followers, liberalism rejects this sort of social constructivist view of society, that reality is subjective and it can, be manipulated for the purposes of the social constructivists. Now, there's an argument that can be made that liberalism and how it's played out with its love of secularism, it has slowly eroded the Christian faith of the West in the UK, but let's look at America here. That the idea that we can't legislate morality, that we can't build legislation based around the dominant faith of the people in the country, in the country, and of course in America, forever the dominant faith has been Christianity. I know the country was founded by deists, but still, the prominent faith was Christianity. And so these liberals, or if you want to call them Fabian socialists, have worn away at the faith, removed it from the public square. Well, what did that do? People will always need a faith. People always need guiding principles. They always need a transcendental entity or being or belief system to appeal to. People, you can't be a strict materialist. You can't be a strict atheist. It literally makes no sense. There is an inherent mystery element built into existence because none of us know why we're here. There are people that claim to know why we're here, whether they be Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or Hindu, whatever. But there is this inherent mystery element built into existence, and there is a certain type of truth that we can only perceive reality through our senses, right? The whole, oh, well, what color is this apple? Well, to me, it looks like red, or maybe there's a green one. But then there's a colorblind person or a person that has some sort of defect, and so they view blue or gray, right? So it's like, how can you actually tell something is 100% true? At the end of the day, the postmodern theorists do have some bit of truth in there, in that it is impossible. And so whenever you remove a faith from the public square that governs society, it creates a vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. So another faith was always going to slide in once Christianity was removed from the public square, once secularism did its work. You can't have a truly secular society. If there's anything that this sort of woke leftist incursion has done to society, it's revealed to those of us with eyes to see that there always has to be some sort of faith-based system to guide humanity, to aid in governance. And so I understand the argument of liberalism and the secularism that came along with it is what led us to woke in general. Now, Carl and other people, and I don't listen to a ton of Carl, but I listen to some of Carl, and other people would say that the whole equity project, trying to force the outcomes, trying to make the group's outcomes equitable across blacks, whites, whatever you want to say, that stems from liberalism. Like a lot of these progressives view themselves as basically ending the liberal project. Okay, well, let's take that to its logical conclusion. Liberalism is based on that we're all equal. Well, if we're all equal, then why don't we have equal outcomes? So now we're going to force those outcomes. So a lot of these people actually believe they are like finishing the work of the founding fathers, that they're finishing the work of bringing about true equality to all people. And of course, that always ends in horrors beyond our imagination. All we have to do is look to the 20th century to see what happens when a society takes this sort of socialist, communistic form of governance where they try to make everyone equal. Now, you could argue that the communists always like to argue, well, true communism hasn't been tried yet. I actually once talked to someone who said that Stalin wasn't a communist. And I was like, that's interesting, because a lot of the communists today call themselves Marxist Stalinists or Stalinist Marxists, however you say it. And he was like, no, 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 no. He wasn't a true communist because he was never actually interested in making people equal. All he wanted was power. And so he lied to the people until he gained enough power. And he became a tyrannical psychopath. And I was like, buddy, you're so close. That's literally what communism is. It's just a Ponzi scheme where psychopaths that want power and want to control everyone's lives convince a bunch of useful idiots that they're actually going to, once the dictatorship of the proletariat's formed, then, once we have enough power, then we're going to slowly dissolve everything and return man to its true source as a social man, and everyone will be equal. But that's literally impossible. You would have to be God. That's why I've actually talked to a lot of communists that are Christians, and they think that communism is the ultimate completion of the Christian project. That they're essentially, if you look at it, it's satanic. They're trying to usurp the role of Christ, the great uniter, where he will bring all men to their knees and bring about an everlasting peace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so in my eyes, they're actually usurping Christ and trying to create a heaven on earth, which is satanic. But they're communists and they're delusional, and they're trying to form Christianity to fit their kind of communism. To get back to Carl here, he says they call themselves liberals. Well, okay, but that does ignore the purposeful subversion of liberalism, even though key aspects of liberalism, like the push for secularism, allowed for that subversion to occur. You push for secularism, you remove Christ, you remove God from society. What's going to happen? Something else takes its place. And before you know it, people are wanting to cut kids' dicks off. It's just, you're always going to have that happen. So there is some truth to the critiques of liberalism. There just are. You can't have a fully secular society. Oh, we're going to have a secular society because we believe that liberalism and the scientific method allows us to approach something as close to humanly possible as true, even though the scientific method technically can never prove anything 100% true. And there are aspects of that I like. I like the idea that you take something and you test it over and over and over and over and over again. And if you basically get the same results over and over and over again, then you can act as if that is true until you keep testing it and something else happens, until proven otherwise. So there is a sort of, it does make sense that you would use that kind of method to build a society around. So I'm always torn. I'm always going back and forth. I don't consider myself a centrist at all, because a lot of the times centrism is viewed as like, in between the left and the right. To me, the left has to be destroyed. The left is a parasitic-like belief system specifically designed to erode everything, like queer theory. What's queer theory? There's a dominant thing and it's oppressive. That there is this dominant thing that is viewed as normal. So you take that thing, you make it weird, you make it weird, you make it queer, and at that point it becomes queered. What happens then? Well, at that point, the thing that was once normal has become queered, but now that it's become queered, that thing is then viewed as normal. And then you just go again and again and again. So it's a queer theory adopted as a mode of governance would undo humanity in a very short time, because it's a never-ending revolution of destroying each norm, and each norm becomes weaker as a result. Like look at the idea of marriage. Marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a sacred covenant between a man and a woman and God. You become closer to the man and woman, and you become closer to God, and you procreate and further human life. It seems as if there is a fundamental truth to be found there. Well, what happens when you queer marriage? You introduce the idea that a man can marry a man and a woman can marry a woman. I know a lot of people, especially like on the James Lindsay side, liberals, want to sort of protect gay marriage and this idea of gay rights. That's kind of like a sacred cow that they don't want to give up on. But I mean, what is more queer than taking something, a man and a woman being married before the eyes of God to procreate human life? What is more queer than dissolving that to include a man and a man and a woman, something that generates nothing other than sexual deviancy and maybe these supposed feelings of love that these people have for one another? And James Lindsay doesn't want to admit that that is a form of wokeness or of queerness, but I just can't. I can't take him at his word for that. It's definitionally queer. It just is. And when I look at Carl Benjamin here, so James Lindsay would say, oh, well, the people in Labor Party are Fabian socialists, and Fabian socialists created Labor Party. So in my mind, I know that history, and I know that's true, but Carl's like, well, they call themselves liberals. And it's like, okay, but like, let's apply that to Christianity. Say you have someone who claims to be a Christian, but it's a queer, black, trans woman who has mutilated their bodies, and they have pride flags everywhere in their church, and they marry men to men and women to women and have drag queens perform at their church, but they call themselves a Christian. Is that a Christian? Is that a Christian? Just because someone says they're something, does that actually make them that thing? To me, that's like sort of like a postmodern bent that Carl is postulating there. And honestly, he calls himself a postmodern traditionalist. So maybe he is using postmodern manipulations in order to say, well, these people call themselves liberals, but then that makes them liberals. Well, by that logic, then a man who calls himself a woman is a woman. By that logic, the definition of woman that they've changed, that they've manipulated, no longer based around obvious, reproduction. When you see a woman, you know it's a woman most of the time, right? And so we all know what a woman is. So if society changes the definition of woman and enough people accept it, does that mean that that person is a woman? That sort of seems to be the kind of logic that Carl is applying here. Well, they call themselves liberal, so that must mean they're liberal. Well, is the man that calls himself a woman? Is the Christian that supports gay marriage and supports women being a part of the clergy and hangs pride flags and progress flags everywhere and has a drag queen come and read the Bible to children or perform a weird dance and read books to them? Does that make them a Christian? No. Just because you call yourself something does not actually mean that you are that thing. So it's not that I'm so much defending James Lindsay or his followers, but it does seem to be a little suspicious that Carl Benjamin is saying that they call themselves liberals, so that is what makes them a liberal. You subvert an institution and you wear it like a skin suit. Does that actually mean that you are that thing that it was originally, or have you subverted that thing? And you're presenting yourself as a liberal. You're presenting yourself as a Christian. You're a man presenting themselves as a woman. Are you a liberal? Are you a Christian? Are you a woman? I suppose it all depends on who wins the war. A long time ago, I never really thought about, I was like, oh, trans woman, that that guy wants to say is a woman. Like that's no big deal. Well, who's that going to hurt? But if you think about that, whoever wins the conversation around what a woman is and what a man is and whoever wins that conversation literally wins the future. If all of society adopts this queer, trans, postmodern, social constructivist view of what makes a man and a woman, then society will look completely different. The entire trajectory of mankind will be changed, especially if you listen to the transhumanists and how they fully intend on not just keeping it from man to woman in terms of transitions, but they talk about this concept called morphological freedom, where people can alter their body in any way they want. And again, this is the bastardization of liberalism. If I talk to a progressive Christian or a progressive normie, or we could say a progressive quote unquote Christian or a normie, and I tell them about this, and they're like, hey, it just kind of seems like you're afraid of progress, and that's just the way society is going. And because they don't believe in a fundamental truth. They don't believe in that anymore. They believe in what the people tell them. They believe what the people in the institutions that they trust tell them. So to like the normie progressive, truth does not matter. All that matters is the will of these fetishized minority groups that they basically worship. All that matters is those people's opinions of what they want to happen. And by those people, I don't even mean the people on the ground. There's plenty of gay people that don't want anything to do with the trans and queer thing. What I'm saying is the elite people, the people that are behind and responsible for the LGBTQ monolith and the funding of it, who are largely transhumanists. All that matters is what those people want, the way that they want to push society. And the other thing that matters are the institutions that tell them that, yep, this is what we're doing. That's all that matters. So it's very clear that both liberalism and Christianity was subverted. Personally, I think that if liberalism and the people that were pushing for it, a lot of them were communists, but a lot of them were actual liberals, and have a vision for a more egalitarian society where there is no dominant religion that is influencing legislation. I do think that if we had a more robust Christianity, not so much of a decentralized form of Christianity like Protestantism brought us, then we would not be in the situation that we're in. Of course, the decentralized form of Protestantism is what led to the creation of America. So I guess all I'm seeing are people like James Lindsay and Carl Benjamin pointing fingers at each other, and they're each using postmodern techniques in order to subvert people's versions of reality and blaming each other. And one of the reasons why I'm so frustrated with James Lindsay is with him labeling everyone woke and redefining what woke is, emptying out its contents, using postmodern subversion tactics to do that. Nobody can have conversations anymore. If you look at the founding of America, the founding fathers and all the different people that had to do with that, each of them had varying opinions on what they wanted to see as the dominant form of governance. And yeah, a lot of them smeared each other and a lot of them were enemies, but a lot of them hashed it out. They talked it out. They made exceptions for one another. Sometimes people win an argument. Sometimes another person would lose an argument. Sometimes they would try to meet in the middle. And this sort of insane dialectical warfare that everyone that used to be called on the right, whether they be the James Lindsay classical liberals, or the dissonant right figures, or the postmodern traditionalists like Carl Benjamin, all they're doing is arguing amongst each other as the enemy of the left, as the left waits in silence. I'm assuming they're waiting in dark rooms, wearing cloaks with hoods as they're trying to communicate with demons. I don't know if they're actually doing that, but it would make sense if our elites were in communication with demons, because who else would do this to society? Who else would purposely try to break society because they believe that society has to be healed or repaired? If they ended up being lizard people, I don't actually believe in the lizard person conspiracy theory, but if I were walking outside and it was a cloudy day and all of a sudden the clouds parted and giant lizard men atop flying saucers descended from the clouds, everybody else would be running around screaming and stuff. And I look up at them and be like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's hard to think that the people that run society manipulate us based on gender, religion, belief systems. It's hard to believe that humans would do this to one another. These people that rule our society, whoever they are, do not have our best interests at heart. And it would be nice if everybody would stop arguing and come to the table and actually talk. To Carl's side, to talk good about Carl, he did want to talk to James Lindsay. And I believe that Carl believes that what he's doing is right. Just like, hopefully, I think that James Lindsay believes that he's doing is right. And it seems as if James Lindsay refused and just called Carl woke right. And while if you talk to James Lindsay and his followers, they have all different kinds of definitions for what woke right is, and they'll talk about the different factions. But the way that it's applied in the world, the way that it's applied online, if you're woke right, it basically just means you're a Nazi. At the end of the day, that's all it really means, regardless of the different rhetorical flourishes they use to try to differentiate between the different people on the dissonant right, it really does just mean that James thinks you're a Nazi. So I guess it would be nice if everyone would just stop being children, stop acting like bitchy little children, and maybe actually just talk to one another. But that is a utopian wish and hope, I fear. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a good one.
The limited principle. Don't be a retard. Never be retarded. Death before retardation. The limiting principle. No heaven required. Leave your element at home. The limiting principle.